So now we'll call this meeting into session, and the first item on the agenda would be for me to notate any agenda changes. So here they are. Added item 6.1, appointment of Assistant Principal 2 at Meigs Middle School. Added item 6.2, appointment of Assistant Principal 2 at Florosa Elementary School. With that, board members, I'm looking for a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker to approve the agenda.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. All in favor? The vote is 5-0. That now brings us down to section 3 on our advertised agenda, to recognitions. Superintendent, item 3.1 will be Children in Crisis Change for Children campaign, presented by Ms. Jenny Hamilton, Ann Johnson, Kitty Johnson, and Ms. Mary Jane Ross. Ladies, would you come forward?
They do not hardly need an introduction from me, so welcome, ladies.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Ms.
And I am here on behalf of Children in Crisis, but before I start that, if I may take a moment, I would like to say thank you to Mr. Walker for his years of service to all of us, to each one of us. Rodney Walker has been a friend to me, and more importantly, he's been a friend to the school system, and he's been a friend to Okaloosa County students through the years, and we appreciate you, Mr. Walker. We really do.
I'll make that second.
Thank you, Lamar. And as I said, I am here on behalf of CIC, Children in Crisis, and the neighborhood for those children that you are all familiar with. We have myself, again, Ann Johnston. We have Ms. Jenny Hamilton and Mr. Ken Hare, who is CEO of Children in Crisis, here tonight. We want to say thank you to the superintendent first, Ms. Jackson, and to each one of you as school board members for allowing us to conduct our Change for Children campaign in our schools each year. You may have one of these Change for Children cards in front of you there. This is our 11th year of the Change for Children donations, and we want to say that all monies collected from Change for Children goes directly to the children and their needs. And those needs include food, clothing, and items like shoes, which of course comes under that, but that's a big deal. School supplies and other personal needs. These monies from Change for Children go directly to those things. Our ADK, Alpha Delta Kappa sorority, which I'm a member of, is the retired teachers group that goes into the schools and works with the principals and with the school contact person that the principal has appointed and designated. So we are all retired professionals. That is an important point for us to make. We are all retired professionals as we go into the schools. And we have continued, and we are volunteers, by the way, of course you know that, but it's important to say that for the record. We are volunteers. We have continued our concern for children after retirement. Each school collects varying amounts of donations from the children, many times through fun activities that are planned by that school resource person that the principal has designated. So this is actually children helping children. And we convey that message to the children as we work through this process so that they're aware that they are helping other children. And so it's a great community service for all of us to be involved in and to feel good about. So at this time, I would like to introduce again Mr. Ken Hare and Ms. Jenny Hamilton, who are going to actually present the awards to the top fundraising schools for 2018. And let me say, all schools are appreciated, every single one, and we thank all of the schools. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Hare and Ms. Hamilton. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Hi, Mr. Hare. Ms.
Hello,
Hamilton.
it's good to be here. Good to see you, Chair, members of the board, and Superintendent. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. And just to say a few words about thanking you, we had over 100 children from Children in Crisis that attend Okaloosa County schools in 2017-18 school year. And they were all on the honor roll. Well, almost all of them, not quite. But they were really working hard to make that. We've had over 20 graduates, high school graduates, since in the last 10 years, and 2 of them this year. We're very proud of those 2. In this school year, 25 participating schools in Okaloosa County raised almost $34,000. And we'd like to recognize and thank the top fundraisers. The high school category, Choctaw High School, who raised over $2,000. Principal was Dr. Lee Hale and Miss Becky Perez, school sponsor.
Come on forward, Dr. Hale.
In the middle? And then if you would stay over here.
Thank you so much for your help. In the middle school category, Ruckel Middle School, who also raised over $2,000, Mr. Paul Whidden, principal, and Miss Denise Beecham, sponsor, school sponsor. In the elementary schools, we had actually 2 schools that were very close in the amount. We want to recognize both. We'd like to recognize Elliott Point Elementary, who raised over $3,000. Miss Kathy Ard, principal. I don't think she was able to be here, but Miss Alicia Dunham. She is here. Yes, the school. Kathy Ard.
Alicia Duhon.
And Alicia Duhon.
Kathy, if you all will stay from here, and then just go to the slide so we can get a group picture.
Thank you so much. Also, Plough Elementary also raised over $3,000. Miss Carolyn McAllister, principal, and Helen McLaren, school sponsor. Before the photo, I'd also like to say that Plough is our overall top fundraiser in the county. They raised $3,527.20.
That's a good place, right where you want to go over here.
And are you all done here?
1 minute.
Mr. Hare?
We'll just let, okay.
Okay.
While they're taking that picture, we did want to thank the school board once more. Ms. Jackson always welcomes us at the beginning of the year, but you just don't understand the role that the school board plays in this, and the principals and the administration, because without you all, this school board actually is such a roadmap to so many things in helping children. It is the key to being able to help these kids. So without you, we could not do this, and we thank you.
Thank you.
Sincerely. And Mary Jane Ross and Kitty, I don't know where they went, Miss Kitty and Mary Jane are the chairpersons of this whole committee, and we want to thank them tremendous for their work that they do throughout the county.
And on behalf of the children, over 825 that have had a home with children in crisis, we thank you for indulging us today. Thank you. God bless.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate you so much. All right, board members, moving on to item 3.2, Superintendent, recognition of Blue Water Bay Tennis Center, presented by Superintendent Mary Beth Jackson.
It isn't very often that I get the opportunity to thank someone in person for stepping up to the plate and helping our own children. And I would like for Brian Humphrey to come forward. Gary, I believe, is Grant Meyer here? Grant? You really helped us out this year, and I just want to thank you for stepping up. They opened their tennis center so that our kids could play there and we could have our tennis tournament there. That's a big, it's a huge deal to me because these children wouldn't have had this opportunity. And I want to thank you personally for doing this, and I want to give this to you on behalf of our school district and all of our little middle school tennis players. And they were pretty excited to get to participate in that, but thank you so much.
No worries, it's our pleasure.
And well, thank you very much. Could you take, we put this on our website? Thank you again so much.
And at this time, item 3.3, recognition of first place winners of the FLYRA Middle School State Championship and FHSAA Class 3A Outdoor State Championship. Ms. Jackson.
Yes, we have some. If Ms. Thrush, if you would join me, and Mr. Destin, if you would join me. We have a student from your neck of the woods as well. We're going to do Niceville High School. This student, Eli West. Eli West, state champion, Class 3A varsity boys shot put. Oh, I can see why he would win.
So I know we have a heavy agenda, but there's no way that I'm letting these kids knock it out of here and not talk about them a little bit. So Eli moved in last spring. I got to meet him and his family as they're moving in. And then here we have a football player coming in from Hoover Academy. If you know anything about high school football, you know Hoover Academy is just about the best team in the country. So I had to meet this kid, and then it's definitely not real hard to find a little film on Hoover Academy. So I pull him up, and I see this kid, number 52, out there just killing people. So I knew we got a heck of a football player moving in, but what I didn't know was three things. A, what a wonderful student he is. B, what a tremendous young man he is. And then C, that he could also throw the shot put very well. So Eli got with Coach Webb. Coach Webb worked with all the throwers at Russell and Niceville. They crafted a plan to kind of get him to where they was, to the point that he performed. But it was countless days coming home, leaving school at 6:30, 7 o'clock, picking up my son from a middle school baseball game that I would see Eli West and Coach Webb, the only two on the practice field, throwing it, or sometimes just Eli. Throw it, pick it up, walk back, throw it again, pick it up, walk back, throw it again. So if there's a student athlete who has truly earned their state championship, it's Elijah West. Congratulations, Elijah.
I noticed that this young man has a Florida Gator lanyard.
Hoorah.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yes.
All right. You're at the top of my list now. Good job.
You want to read about Maddie?
Yes. The next young lady is Miss Madeline Kish. Am I saying that
Yes,
correctly?
ma'am.
Thank you. State champion, Class 3A, varsity girls pole vaulting. And I just think that is, oh my goodness. Here.
So I have a great story about Maddie Kish. So, hold that, Maddie.
Yes.
So rewind about 8 years ago, I'm named principal at Emerald Coast Middle School in Walton County. It's April and I've gotten a job. The school is not finished being built yet, which starts in August. So the announcement was made that all of the 5th graders, due to overcrowding in Butler and Bay Elementary, all the 5th grade were going to attend the new school at Emerald Coast Middle School with me being their new principal. Now that decision was maybe not met with as much enthusiasm as you might think it would be with some of the parents of those 5th grade kids. So I spent the better part of about a month and a half doing one-on-one parent conferences and discussions with 5th grade parents. About the 2nd or 3rd one that I took was Diana Kish with this girl, 10-year-old little girl in a ponytail with ridiculously long skinny legs. And we talked about how 5th grade was going to work. It must have went well because I convinced her mother to be president of our new parent group called the PACT, Parent Advisory Council Team, and we did some great things out there together, Miss Kish. But then I ended up leaving Emerald Coast when Maddie was a 7th grader, and I kind of lost touch with her. So now fast forward to 2 years ago at Niceville High School, and I knew her brother Zach was at NHS because he played football there. And so it's orientation open house, my first one. I got all these butterflies, and I see come down the hall, Diana Kish. And I said, well, cool, yeah, Zach's here, that's great. And then out from behind Diana steps Maddie Kish, a now high-performing athlete, and no longer the 10-year-old girl in a ponytail who smiled all the time with freakishly long legs. But I am so proud of how far you've come and the amazing job that you're doing and everything. Maddie Kish, state pole vault champion. Yes.
Thank you.
Do you want to do one picture now, or do you want to wait and get them all up here? Let's wait and get them all up.
Wait.
Yes, ma'am.
Our next student is Mr. Grant Meyer. This person, Mr. Ryan Driscoll, Destin Middle School, state champion, boys middle school discus. That is so awesome.
It's shot. I'm sorry.
Put that on there.
Well done. I didn't know we were going to have to say something, but just like most of the athletes up here that are state champions, their work ethic, their demeanor is always top notch. Ryan is no exception. You can tell how big he is. In 4 years, I think he's going to be another Eli West. So in the shot and discus, football, in the classroom, outstanding student. So congratulations.
And next, from Ruckle Middle School, Megan Haig. We have great kids in this county. We forget that sometimes. Not only are they talented athletically, but they're smart. They do the right thing. I love it. Miss Megan Haig, Ruckle Middle School, state champion, girls middle school discus. Congratulations, young lady.
I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to brag on both Megan and her mother. You know, just today, she's just the kind of student, you're going to be so happy to have her coming to Niceville next year, Mr. Morello, because today, when students, their first day out of school, she was at the school helping teachers move their rooms. I saw her moving boxes around today. Megan's not only a great discus champion, she is a great student. So she's going to do great things at Niceville High School. We're so proud of her. So proud of her coach. Now you see the coach right here. Also, we have the fortune she coaches the Ruckles throwers and she coaches the Niceville floor. And we can just say enough about her talent. She's produced 2 state champions in this short time. I mentioned Megan's mother because Ms. Haig, I just presented her with our Volunteer of the Year. She has logged over 5 years of volunteering at Ruckle, from everything from running off tests for teachers to running the school store to just being at events like dances and athletic events, taking up money and that kind of thing. So appreciative of Ms. Haig, so proud of her and the daughter she's produced in Megan, and congratulations to both of them.
They probably all kind of make 2 rows. Maybe put the athletes up front and everybody else kind of behind them by school.
Just almost declared. Mr. Rankle almost.
I'm behind Driscoll. Don't worry about it.
I'm always absolutely loved every minute of it.
Perfect, thank you.
Congratulations. Good job.
I am finished, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Good job. All right, thank you to all the winners and the superintendent and the board members and the principals and the coaches and everyone else. All right, moving on to section 4 would be visitors. Item 4.1 is Dr. Emily Lamberson, proposed relocation of pre-KD classes. And Dr. Lamberson, I know you've spoken before and you're well acquainted with the guidelines.
Yes.
And ma'am, you'll have 4 minutes, and if I can remember, at 30 seconds, I'll hold the card up for you.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yes,
Good
ma'am.
evening. My name is Dr. Emily Lamberson. I had hoped to use my time tonight to thank you all for finding an equitable solution to the pre-KD relocation to STEM. Perhaps that was naively optimistic. Events of the past week have made it clear that this relocation is a done deal. The district will not investigate other options, and that is their prerogative, but I think we should be clear on what's going on. So I find myself in a conundrum. If I acquiesce to the relocation of pre-KD, which I think is a suboptimal solution, then I reaffirm that late notice and vague communication are useful tools for dealing with dissenting parents. But if I continue to advocate for current pre-KD classes to remain in their neighborhood schools where they belong, utilizing facilities that already exist for them, and avoiding the disruption of a move, I risk harming the educational opportunities of new non-disabled students that are coming into these already overcrowded schools. I waste the valuable time of teachers who may end up having to move their classes to STEM anyway, and I take away time from district staff which needs to be spent dealing with questions raised by this relocation. Now, over the past several weeks, parents have submitted many questions to the district, and I know y'all have been very busy, and we're eager to hear back on those answers. So some of the questions that I want to mention are, how are we going to fit 6 pre-KD classes, 2 VPK classes, and a media center into 9 rooms and still have room for growth? Will utilizing STEM's kindergarten building isolate students? What's the timeline for the renovations and the move? Is 1 playground going to be sufficient for 8 or 9 classes? What will you do if VPK fails? I don't think it will, but if I'm wrong, this move will be non-compliant with both the spirit and the letter of the law. And what of the rights of pre-KD students that are currently at STEM to a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment? Are they getting that now? The topic of rezoning has come up in the board's workshop last week, and I'm not the first to say that rezoning is desperately needed. Thank you for bringing it up. Rezoning raises questions regarding the pre-KD move as well. What happens if we give that rezoning can one last kick? I think many will see it as disingenuous and possibly discriminatory if after relocating pre-KD, rezoning doesn't take place and the district somehow manages to find funds to buy more portables. And if we do rezone, what's that going to look like? Will you consider moving pre-KD again so that they can be placed once more in their neighborhood schools where they belong? Will VPK come along too? Now, I understand you may not be able to operate a pre-KD, much less a VPK, in every elementary school in the zone. But I hope you understand the inequity in placing the only pre-K that is legally required to accept disabled children on the far west side of the central zone, especially when Blue Water currently has better pre-KD facilities than STEM does. Now, I want to thank you for working to address this complicated situation. To summarize, I've heard frequently, you have no money, you have no space, the space you do have is old, yet you still have top-rated schools. That's a testament to the phenomenal teachers, faculty, and staff you have here in Okaloosa County. Additionally, I was encouraged to hear that 89.2% of the 6 to 21-year-old ESE students who attend public schools, and I don't know if that includes gifted, they get to spend 80% or more of their day in gen ed. I look forward to the day when you can say you have a phenomenal pre-KD program where inclusion and matriculation concerns are given the priority they require. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lamberson. All right, moving on to public comment. Board members, I have 3 blue cards here in my possession, and I'm assuming that they were given to me in the order that they were presented.
Why don't you let all these people go?
Do you think they might have somewhere else they'd rather be?
I don't think so. Why don't you go ahead and excuse them and move on to business?
Well, all right, Mr. Walker, I'll do that, and maybe I'll even do it again in a moment after we finish up with all the presentations. So I'll recess this meeting for about a minute and a half so that folks that may want to leave can, and then we'll reconvene in just a minute. Okay?
I guess nobody wants to leave.
That's kind of what, that was the impression I got, Mr. Walker. The folks that are going to make public comment are acquainted with the guidelines that the board has, and each person will have 4 minutes to make their presentation, and I'll call them in the order that I have these cards that I received them. So first of all, I have Mr. Patrick Strong from the Okaloosa Education Support Professionals Group or Union. All right, Mr. Strong, you've got 4 minutes. I'll try to remember to hold the card up. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, go ahead.
Hello, I am Patrick Strong, President of Okaloosa Education and Staff Professionals. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members, and Superintendent for allowing me to speak today. Over 3,000 Okaloosa County School District employees got up on the morning of February the 2nd with great anticipation that they would make a positive, life-changing difference in a child's life. Each of us thought if we abide by school board policy and did as directed by our supervisor, that we would be protected in the event of a false accusation. That somehow, if we abided by policy, that our supervisor, our superintendent, and our school board would stand up for us when false accusations come our way. That somehow, we might be safe within the policies and procedures set forth by this board. On the morning of February 2nd, Anthony Campbell got up, went to work with great anticipation about making a difference in a child's life. His goal was to get all the children to and from school safely that day. If you have ever met Anthony, you might agree that he is very kind-hearted. In a few conversations I've had with him and a few minutes we've met together, he is someone that I would trust to drive my kids to and from school. Anthony had a great morning run. It was his afternoon run that his life changed forever. He checked his bus to make sure that it was safe for children. He went to one school to pick up his children. Staff at the school brought him a child with a bus pass. On that bus pass was only the child's name, address, and his bus number, marked today only and signed by school staff. The radios on the buses were down that day. My understanding, because a repeater was down. He commented to the school staff that he didn't know where that address was. He immediately picked up his personal cell phone and called the bus barn to talk to his supervisor. After having conversation with the child, he and his supervisor agreed on the closest bus stop to her house. He took the child to that bus stop and she ran off the bus, headed towards her home. He watched her run off before closing the door and driving off to his next stop. All of this should be corroborated by the cameras on the bus. Anthony's personal phone has spotty service out in that remote area of that bus stop. As soon as he was back in a service area, he called the bus barn to make sure everything was okay with the child. A conscientious employee going over and beyond to keep our children safe. He took a child home that had never ridden his bus before with only a bus pass with limited information, according to bus board policy. He talked with his supervisor and agreed to a bus stop within board policy. He dropped the child off at the closest bus stop to her home, according to district policy. I'm missing a page. He even called the bus barn before he came back to town to make sure He didn't need to go back for some reason. Signs of a very conscientious bus driver, indeed. You, the school board, have a choice to make today. You can say that he abided by policy and procedures that we set forth and we will support him, or you can turn your back on him and facilitate a hardship that very few of us could last through. The time for innocent until proven guilty is here. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Strong.
Thank you.
You have a handout?
Yeah, do you mind if I pass?
No, go ahead. It'll be fine.
I just want to go and have a copy.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. All right, at this time, I'd like to call forward Marissa Montano, I believe. Well, welcome.
Hi.
There you go. All right.
Good
You
evening.
have 4 minutes, young lady.
4? Okay. Good evening. My name is Marissa Montano, and I'm a student at Shoal River Middle School. For the past 4 years, I've rode a school bus with no AC. I've handed out 2 pictures that were taken on a school bus about a month ago. One reads 106 degrees and the other 120 degrees. The best way I can explain the feeling is when you open your oven door and all the heat comes rushing to your face. This is a safety hazard for us students and the bus drivers. The bus drivers are in these conditions longer than we are. My bus route is about 45 minutes long in the afternoon. That is a long time to be sitting in the heat. Sometimes when I get off the bus, I feel so weak and tired. I know it's because of the heat. I ask that you find a realistic solution to fixing the AC on our school buses. Go back to the state, make it a safety health argument. Also, I invite each one of you, when school starts back the first week, to ride my school bus route with me, not just for one day, but for the whole week. Thank you.
Thank you, young lady. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Bryan.
Young lady, where did she run off to? Can she come back up quick, please? You don't think we were going to let you get away that easy, do you? What bus do you ride, dear?
They changed the number to 0219.
Which one?
0219.
Okay. And you go to Shoal River?
Yes.
Okay. Just to let you know, last week I rode bus 9913. Bus driver is here right now, and his bus doesn't have air conditioning. And so I feel it. I was on your bus, I was dressed up in a tie and everything else, so he got on to me about doing that, but I said, you know, if these kids are doing that, then, you know, then I should do it too, just to feel it. Now, Ms. Jackson has made it known to us that Escambia County is looking, I don't know if they're going to vote on it this week, but hopefully we're going to get some more buses. They're used, but I think most of them had air conditioning on them. If I'm
No.
No. Okay.
Only buses.
Seatbelts.
Seat belts, okay. All right.
Buses after 2008 in our
Have
school
seat belts.
district
Okay.
have,
Have air conditioning.
have air
I'm sorry, I
conditioning.
misunderstood. So.
I'm sorry.
But I do feel, I've been on there, so, and so I know where you're coming from, and hopefully we can, in the future, we can get that funding for you, for buses, get all our buses up to date, but, you know, take a lot of courage to come up here and do what you did today, so.
You can't see her face, but she was agreeing. All right, thank you.
Chairman, if I may ask a question, what percentage of our buses are air conditioned? Do we know?
Mr. Kutsaratus is not here, and I don't think Jay is here tonight.
I think I presented that information at a board meeting before that. I wanted to, and I don't want to misspeak tonight not having the data in front of me, but you know, having 4 kids who all ride the bus, and a child who doesn't sweat or have the ability to sweat who rides in an air-conditioned school bus. It is a concern. I've also requested at different times that we pool our capital discretionary funding and start buying buses that are more efficient, that have AC and have seat belts. So hopefully at our capital budget workshop this summer, we can, you know, start to look at our oldest bus fleet in the state of Florida and start to see if we can look at our funding. But because of our capital funding woes, it is a concern. It's, you know, do we address our buses or our buildings, and they're both severe needs in our county.
Well, if you'll notice, you go back, it's been almost 5 years now that I recommended that of all new purchases of buses, if you go back and look at the minutes, that I recommended that we air condition every new bus that we purchase.
And we do.
And consequently,
we did.
The amount to do that was very small considering what it meant to the kids. But this school board has already taken action that any new buses we purchase will always be purchased with air conditioning. So I think if we all understand that at one time we was probably number 2 in the state with the modernized buses, but unfortunately we all know the financial crisis, we've never received even a third of the money that we get from the state that pays for our bus transportation. We always have to supplement it out of local funds. We always have for 40 years, and it's never changed and probably never will, except if we take it on our personal self locally. And Ms. Jackson has faced the same situation that all superintendents has. There's never been enough money for buses. But I do want everyone to understand that this board has already taken action that any new buses we purchase will be air conditioned.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Thank you. All right, so unless there's any further comment, let's go ahead and move on to the next public comment. That will be by Mr. Gene Early. And Mr. Early, you too, sir, are familiar with the guidelines and procedures, and I see that you want to speak about the investigative standards and procedures. And so you'll have 4 minutes, and I'll try to remember to hold the card up when you have 30 seconds left. All right?
You did this to me on purpose, didn't you? Put me after her? Oh my gosh. Okay, sir. This is an easy one, and it's not. Okay, first off, that's a great first policy. Okay, the procedures in that are fantastic. I love them. We're on the right track with all of this. But I got one thing I want to ask you. I know this isn't the school board policy. This is the HR procedures for investigations. Great. I sent y'all a document the past week or so that got to me 2 weeks ago, and that was a sheriff's investigation document and report. If I had seen this document before I got that, it'd be completely different. But within that document, it shows very clearly that while the investigations were going on, your investigator had union activity that was not the union representing the individual at a union labor and management meeting talking to the individual who was the suspect or the respondent, I think is the term you use. Anytime you have labor talking to management when an individual's trying to do an investigation, I hate to say it, but in my experience with federal, state, and private industry, okay, that's the problem. The one thing that this report is, or this investigation procedure is missing, and that I hope that you will add into the policy that you're writing right now for school board investigations, is that if the investigator is contacted by any union member outside of the HR management and union meeting when they are questioning the respondent, I would appreciate it if that was notified to Ms. Jackson and to the school board. Y'all are the ones that hold the contracts. Y'all are the ones that hold the legal responsibility here. When these things happen, that's inappropriate action. I mean, that's influence that just doesn't work right for us. Okay, and looking at everything that we've gone through in the last year here that I've been a part of, We can correct that. We can identify that with a few pen strokes. You can add it into this procedure. You can add it into the policy. But the reality of life is when you have got someone talking to your investigator outside of those meetings, that's inappropriate. Okay? Thank you very much. I appreciate y'all's time.
Thank you, Mr. Early. All right. And so, colleagues, that finishes up the public comment section, and we now move to Section 6, Administrative and Personnel Appointments. These, of course, are the new items that we added. 6.1, Appointment of Assistant Principal 2 at Meigs Middle School, recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Ms. Jackson.
Thank you. I would like to invite Mr. Carl Schroeder and his family to come down, please. Oh boy, look at that baby. We love babies here. Hi, everybody. Hi, Carl. I'm going to read this, and then I'll give the board a chance to take action on my recommendation.
Mr. Destin, I'm going to pass you the gavel.
Give you an opportunity to say anything you would like to say to them. Okay? Carl is a proud product of the Okaloosa County School District. He attended Edwards Elementary, Bruner Junior High School, and Fort Walton Beach High School. When he graduated from Fort Walton Beach High School, he attended the University of Southern Mississippi. I went there to many football games. And earned a bachelor's degree in athletic administration, coaching, and biology and physical science. He began his career in education, teaching biology and fundamental science and coaching football, wrestling, weightlifting, and track at Fort Walton Beach High School until 2001. He then moved to Central Florida to be a head football coach, educator in Osceola County, Florida. While in Osceola County, I received Osceola County's Dean Cherry Coach of the Year Award and the Central Florida Citrus Bowl Coach of the Year Award. In 2014, he earned his Master's in Ed Leadership from the American College of Education and moved back to the Panhandle teaching anatomy and physiology and biology and coaching track at Walton High School. In 2016, he returned to Okaloosa County as the Dean of Students at Baker School. I present to you Mr. Carl Schroeder as my recommendation for the, I can't talk tonight, the AP job at Meigs.
Yes, ma'am, and it's easy because I just read it here. But in any case, I will make the motion for the superintendent's recommendation.
And we have a second.
I'll second it.
Okay. I'll call for the vote. Passes unanimously.
Congratulations, Mr. Schroeder.
I wanted to thank the board, Ms. Jackson, and the leadership team, our administration leadership team. I'm a product of Okaloosa County and very proud of it, and been working very hard my entire life to help children. And I just am thankful that I'm being given a chance to work with the leadership team at Meigs. I'm very excited about that, returning back to my natural colors here of Southern Mississippi. It's been a long trek, and I just want to thank you. And as always, it doesn't matter what position you're in, as long as you're living your purpose. No matter where you're living your purpose, as long as you're in your purpose, it doesn't matter where you're at, because you're taking care of kids. It doesn't matter if you're on the bus. It doesn't matter if you're behind the broom. It doesn't matter if you're in the classroom. It doesn't matter if you're an AP. We're all serving students. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
I know there's a bunch of Meigs people out here.
Oh, I see them.
Meigs, would you stand up, please? And it's Can you get those balloons on the table?
You keep it if you want.
Yeah.
I am so pleased to do this. I really am.
I want to also mention my family here. I've got my wife, Terry Schroeder. Of course, she's at the district level. She's a student service director. My daughter, Lauren, she's our second grade teacher at Southside, does a fabulous job. And our little Libya, our little miracle baby we just had a couple months ago. My son, Hans, Chase, Ed, and Elaine, which were both in the school district for 30 years each. And there's Lee in the back.
I think it's picture time.
Talking about the baby. Congratulations.
Yep.
Oh, sure.
All right, Madam Superintendent, we got another one, 6.2.
Yes, we do.
Appointment of Assistant Principal 2 for Florosa Elementary School, recommended
Yes.
by the superintendent.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and Board, this evening I am very happy to present to you a young man, Mr. J.C. Cotton. Incredible young man. Been through a lot in his life. And I would like to invite him and his wife and his family. Bring the littles with you.
She can't wait.
There they are. Oh, good to see you. He is a proud product of Okaloosa County Schools and graduated from Fort Walton Beach High School in 1997. He attended Northwest Florida State College and the University of West Florida. He graduated from the University of West Florida in 2016 with a master's degree in educational leadership. He is married to his beautiful wife, Patty, and they have 2 children, Addison and JC III. Let me tell you about JC. I don't know if he remembers this. I reminded him of this when I was with his career in technical education. I kept looking at all these stats, and all your kids were passing all these very difficult career and technical education programs. Very difficult. And I kept thinking, I'm going to go meet this kid. I'm going in there and meet this young man. And I walked in there, and all you have to do is watch him interact with kids. And you knew then he was the right guy. He was the right guy. And I think, JC, you're going to do a phenomenal job. Is the principal here? And if you're here for JC, okay. I see Miss Charlene Couvion out there, and I remember Miss Couvion sharing with me what an incredible young man this was and his story. And if he ever wants to tell you his story, you should listen. And School Board, I turn it over to you.
So, I'm looking for a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. All in favor? The vote is 5-0 in favor.
JC.
Congratulations.
Well, School Board and guys and ladies, I'm so excited to be a part of Team Florosa. I got a I'm excited.
Thank you, Mr. You're still part of this. You haven't died yet.
I have some hand sanitizer in this bag as well as other things, because you are going to need it.
JC's going from Fort Walton Beach High School to elementary school. And he is very excited. Come right here, dear. Let's get your picture. Right there.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Walker, I don't know, but this might have been the juncture some of them were waiting for me to recess. So how about this? You want to do it again? You want me to do it again? Okay. I'll recess for a minute and a half. What'd I tell you? And I would like to welcome Mr. Don Ankers, who's sitting in as our attorney tonight, as Mr. McInnes is not able to be here tonight. So thank you, Mr. Ankers. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to section 7, that would be committee and staff reports. These were items that were presented at the workshop, and they are non-action items, of course, board members, as you know. All right, moving down to section 8, consent agenda. Approval of the consent agenda. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Chairman, I would request
Yes,
that
sir.
the 8.12, which is the generator that we discussed,
Yes, sir.
be removed from the consent so we can discuss it a little bit more.
All right. All right, so, Ms. Crawford, we're going to pull item 8.12 at Mr. Destin's request and move that to discussion. Okay? Anything further, board members, on consent? If not, I'm looking for a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. All in favor? The vote is 5-0. All right, so scroll down. It's going to take a second or two. And we move to section 9, Superintendent's Human Resources Business. And we'll take up your item, Mr. Destin, and we get to section 10, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Chambers, 9.1. This was an information item that was presented to the board. 9.2 is a request to advertise a public hearing for the adoption of a new job description for a mental health counselor, presented by Ms. Lindsay Maxey, Specialist Human Resources, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. So we're looking for a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion? All right, let's call the question. All in favor? The vote is 5-0. My computer jumped around just for a minute. Okay, back online now. All right, 9.3, request to advertise a public hearing for the adoption of a revised job description for a custodial zone manager, presented by Ms. Maxey, Specialist Human Resources, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. Looking for a motion. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. All in favor? Vote is 5-0. And for members of the public, I'll just point out that these job descriptions have all been discussed earlier at the school board workshop. But in any case, we have several. 9.4, request to advertise the public hearing for adoption of a revised job description for lead custodian, presented by Ms. Maxey, Human Resources, and recommended by the superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. All in favor? Votes 5-0. 9.5, request to advertise a public hearing for adoption of revised job description for a school custodian hourly, presented by Ms. Maxey, Human Resources, and recommended by the superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
It was a tie. Ms. Thrush seconds the motion. All in favor? Votes 5-0. 9.6, request to advertise a public hearing for adoption of revised job description for school custodian 2, presented by Ms. Maxey, Human Resources, and recommended by the superintendent.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second. Mr. Destin.
Second by Mr. Destin. All in favor? The vote's 5-0. 9.7, request to advertise a public hearing for adoption of a revised job description for school custodian 2 day, presented by Ms. Maxey, Specialist, Human Resources, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. All in favor? The vote's 5-0. 9.8, request to advertise a public hearing for adoption of a revised job description for a cleaner, presented by Ms. Maxey, Human Resources, and recommended by the superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. All in favor? Votes 5-0. 9.9, request to advertise a public hearing for adoption of a new job description for a roving cleaner, presented by Ms. Maxey, Specialist in Human Resources, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. All in favor? Votes 5-0. 9.10, personnel recommendations, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Thrush. Any discussion? All in favor? The vote's 5-0. 9.11, employment separations, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum, and recommended by the superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Ms. Thrush. All in favor? Votes 5-0. 9.12, employee transfers, presented by Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. All in favor? Votes 5-0. 9.13, employee suspension, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Ms. Thrush. Any
Question.
discussion? Yes, sir.
This is the one that was discussed earlier?
No.
Different one. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other discussion? All right, let's go ahead and call the question. All in favor? Votes 5-0. All right, 9.14, employee suspension, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, recommended by the superintendent.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion?
This is the one that you were referencing, Mr. Destin.
Would you, Marcus, can you give us a little detail on where we are in this process? I think we're suspending without pay pending the outcome of an investigation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And we're being, the investigating agencies, Sheriff's Department, DCF?
My understanding, the sheriff's office is investigating the situation.
And we've got no indication from
Not
this
to
time.
date. I think just based with past practice, when these type of situations occur, I think we suspend with pay until the board meeting, so such time as we decide to suspend without pay.
Well, Marcus, has this not been going on, what, 2 months, 3 months? What's the length of time?
Unfortunately, about 3 months.
Well, I'm just amazed that we don't have any information from any of the other agencies or in this length of time. I mean, what I'm saying is, I guess at this point in time, you still don't have information other than move the direction we're moving, correct?
Correct.
And I guess, should this motion recommendation be approved, this employee has a right of appeal?
Yes, sir.
And should this investigation now turn out to be any charges, then they get the they get the pay back, right?
Absolutely.
Well, this is similar to an earlier situation where I voted no, and I'm trying to see what the difference might be. In both cases, it appears the employee was following guidelines and doing their job. So.
And I'm going to ask Marcus, this individual they did the investigation from February until now, and they just charged him with a felony. I don't know what I think it was child endangerment or.
So my understanding is there is a charge, there is a felony, it's a 3rd degree right now. But because it's been an active investigation, as the school district, we have not been able to look into that matter. Once the sheriff's office has concluded, we will look into the matter as well. And it's not to say that we believe that the employee's done anything wrong. Right now, we are waiting for the sheriff's department.
All right. And so for me to vote, has there been a felony arrest of this employee?
Yes.
And Marcus, I think it would be good for the public. Do you have the school board policy in front of you?
I do.
So that the public understands that we are acting as the school board policy directs us to act. I can't go any other way.
Correct.
Where the decision might be is that the board has the option of deciding whether to suspend with or without pay. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, the way it works, and we've had these cases just very recently.
Right.
I mean, and my position's always been, and I've been 20 years on this board, once you recommend to this board that they be, because this particular individual's actually been 2.5 months with pay, but once you bring it to this school board, my position has always been that until it's resolved in a legal situation, that I always supporting the employee without pay. And I think if you go back and look, I don't think there's ever been a case that I know of in all the years I've been on this board that we did not do that. And then, as we all know, and to my knowledge, there may have been a case or two that sometime, if it's been overturned, the law's very clear. We must pay them their entire pay, back pay, plus we must pay their attorney fees.
Correct. And
all of that. And as Ms. Jackson said, and let me correct now, when Ms. Jackson asked you, has the individual been charged with a felony?
Yes.
If he's been charged with a felony, if you go back and look at the statutes, this board has no choice but to take suspension. Now, yes, we do have the choice of suspending with or without pay, but this board, to my knowledge, is never not suspended without pay until it's resolved at a later date. But now, naturally, if 3 members of this board wishes and chooses to continue to put the employee on suspension with pay, 3 hands come up, it can be done. But as I said, in all the years I've ever been on this board, I've never known us to not be consistent, and we suspend without pay until the case is resolved. And with a felony charge, I think that we all understand if a person's found innocent, he's given he or she's given all the back pay, all their attorney fees and everything. But I mean, we've just had several cases very recently that's been identical to this. And I don't see anything that would change my mind that I must support the superintendent's recommendation that we suspend without pay.
All right, Mr. Walker, so that's your motion, sir?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Walker to support the superintendent's recommendation. I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Thrush. Any further discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor of the motion? Motion is carries 5-0. All right, moving on to section item 9.15, reinstatement reimbursement of sick leave due to line of duty illness, injury, medical examination presented by Mr. Chambers, Assistant Superintendent Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? The vote's 5-0. 9.16, leave without pay, presented by Mr. Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Ms. Thrush. All in favor? Votes 5-0. 9.17, instructional and educational support personnel recommendations for the 2018-2019 school year, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Vote 5-0. All right, moving now to discussion agenda, section 10. We'll now take up item 8.12. Board members, you may have to roll back to that item on the consent agenda. This is regarding the replacement generator for the Nutrition Center in Niceville, Florida, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director, Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent. Mr. Destin, you asked to move this item, sir, so please go ahead.
I did. As we discussed at the workshop, I was uncomfortable that we only got one bid on a $142,000 piece of equipment. I'm still a little uncomfortable with that. I've done some preliminary research, nothing absolutely sure. So, having dealt with generators and freezers for the last 50 years of my life, we've got an 80 by 100 foot freezer in Destin that we've used a generator as backup power twice in the last 25 years. Instead of buying the generators, there are companies that will lease them to you, and they will even allow you to put money down and have it reserved during hurricanes and other tropical events. The price that we paid for generator Opal was $800 a week. The prices have gone up since then, but even if we double that, we're at $1,600 a week, and we usually use them for about a week's time. And the point I'm getting to is I'm uncomfortable about only one bid. Also, if we can get a generator to be on standby that we can spend at a maximum $5,000 or $6,000, it seems to me $142,000 would go a long way toward other projects that we need. So on that information, I'm going to move that we table the item until the next meeting, which will give us time to research, first of all, the price, and secondly, are there generators available in the area to have on standby that we may use in the events that we need them.
All right, so we're looking for a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Walker. All right, any discussion regarding tabling the recommendation?
Well, I guess I have some questions and concerns about leasing or holding a generator, in that, you know, with all due respect, the school district is different than a restaurant. Many of our school facilities are used as shelter locations. Just as this past weekend, we had a school used as a shelter location for the tropical storm Alberto. So I have some concerns about a standby generator, in that if we do have an inclement weather event or another, you know, lightning strike, what have you, or just failure of a generator, how close would a standby unit be? Because if it had to be trucked in or delivered, you know, the roadways could be blocked, bridges could be down, and if our facilities are used as shelters, and then we are also providing food at those sheltered locations, if our main food facility doesn't have a generator backup ready, that's of concern. I mean, I think I certainly can't speak for other board members, but I'm in agreement with you. It's concerning that for a variety of equipment or any capital need, we are not getting the number of bidders to make things more competitive, and that's concerning. I don't think it's for a lack of effort. I know Mr. Wyndham and his staff do a great job. These bid requests are put out online. Companies are given ample notice. The staff goes out of their way to make contact with vendors and say, hey, did you notice? I think in this case, I want to say at the workshop, Mr. Wyndham mentioned that somebody, that has been in the past, slipped their calendar.
And I understand, and I think those are all relevant comments, and I certainly don't want to put our visiting attorney on the spot. But I think this discussion revolves around tabling the motion. So we have a motion to table by Mr. Destin. And did we have a second, Ms. Walker?
I second it.
Second by Mr. Walker.
Let me add to this, is for years now, we have leased generators. This has been nothing new. And Ms. Thrush was concerned about the availability of getting them there in time. But if you go back and look at all the storms that we've had, we've actually, most of, even the schools that were shelters, we've always actually had backup generators that we've leased. The county commissioners actually furnished them to us because they had them on standby on wheels. And the biggest concern that I have and must support Mr. Destin is Vince, come
Mr. Chairman, if I could, and I don't want to be put on the spot, but Robert's rules do say that a motion to table is not subject to discussion.
That's right.
But what I have concerned, Mr. White, is Vince, I need to have you answer this question. I'm concerned.
I'm going to defer to the board member in this case, but I'm going to hold it short.
Okay, but what I'm concerned about is we ended up having one bid because Vince, you indicated, that the other ones were late coming in.
Well, we had a second bidder that intended on bidding that was late. That's correct.
But what I'm saying is when something like this happens, do we have the authority to back out of the bid, or do we have to honor when it's just one bid? I needed to ask you that.
You have the authority to, as a matter of fact, on page 17 of the document that's sent all of you, under the award section, you can reject any or all bids or any portion thereof and re-advertise it with identical specs or with revised specs.
All right, I'll deem that question relevant, Mr. Attorney. So we can get out of the contract if we had one.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Scally.
And the other thing I need to mention is that the funding source for this generator was food service, so therefore, if we table it, we'll have to check into whether it's allowable to have a lease rolling out of federal funds.
Okay.
So that could be an issue.
Sure. And Mr. Attorney, my understanding is once we table it, the only way it comes back is through action of a board member. Is that correct?
Let me modify my motion to table to a time certain, the next meeting.
All right.
And
so the motion's been modified to table until the next meeting. Okay.
And
Mr. Walker, do you maintain your second?
I second.
Okay.
And one answer to Mr. Thrush's questions, which were good. I just came off of a stand on the board of directors at Fort Walton Beach Medical Center, and they in fact had standby generators. And if there's any entity that it's more important to keep running than this district, I would think it's the hospital. In fact, the entity that provided those standby generators is in Fort Walton. There's also a big one in Mobile.
Okay.
I've probably been more than liberal in allowing this discussion. But in any case, let's call the question. All in favor to table until the next board meeting? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Winslow. All right, so moving on to Section 11, Construction Program Owners Representatives Business, 11.1, Program Status Report, Mr. Walker.
Just want to let you board members and superintendent know that we've started work on Richburg and making real excellent progress. And Mr. Bryan, I know you'll be happy to hear that I think we'll be able to meet our deadline and have our classes ready for the fall.
Awesome. Great. Good, Mr. Walker. Thank you, sir. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Just has the construction committee talked about the other areas or other facilities needs?
We met with the principal. In fact, the Mary Beth staff has met with the principal, and also Jacobs Titan has met with her, and we look like we're going to be able to accommodate her on her front office and all that with that money that she has in reserve. But we're having to work through legal to make sure that that money can be used for the purpose it's going to be used for, and it indicated it will be.
Was that also for the changing room too, Mr. Walker?
What?
The changing room?
What?
At Richburg, a changing room, I think.
Yes,
Ms. Rickman.
yes.
All right. All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Walker. All right, moving on to Section 12, Information Technology Seat Management, 12.1. CACI Task Order Number 2-105 for 9 additional cameras and DVR at Mary Esther Elementary School, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, Specialist Seat Management, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. Item 12.2, CACI Task Order Number 2-101 for security camera repairs at Okaloosa STEM Academy, presented by Mr. Keith, Specialist Seat Management, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant. Hearing no discussion, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. All right, Mr. Ankers, moving to attorney's business, sir.
Mr. McGinnis informed me prior to leaving town that there were no matters of urgency and that he will be present at your next board meeting.
All right. You hope so? Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Ankers. All right, Superintendent, ma'am, any business?
I have a couple of items, and I've asked a couple of staff to share some things with you. Eric Mitchell, would you come up and talk about our live streaming of our graduations? Oh, yeah. Phenomenal. We started doing this, what, Eric, 2-3 years ago? And it's just amazing.
Just some general information from the streaming process for this year's graduations. In total, we had, as of today, as of this morning, we had 4,009 actual viewers. Those are people who've tuned in to watch the streams, whether they watched live, whether they watched this morning, whether they've watched it 10 times to enjoy it. We've had 4,009 views. We actually had 646 actual live streaming views. That's people who tuned in to watch the live stream as it happened as part of graduation. A couple other important bits. 44 different states watched our streaming and 31 different countries.
That is amazing.
And it just goes to show that this was something that has become a very important part of graduation. I will share with you that we had a parent who didn't know who I was, but knew my wife, and was talking to me about how happy her sister was. She couldn't come to graduation. She watched the stream. She had a great shot. She watched it. She said, "I can't believe how good a stream this was," not knowing that I was a stream guy. I said, "Well, thank you. That's what we do." And then she goes, "Yeah," and then I watched it and realized I was there, and she had a better view than I did watching it from home. So we try very hard to give folks, with the resources that we've got, to give folks a great stream to watch, and it's working out really good. And I have to say a big thank you to the stream team.
Yes.
Those 8 folks, they do everything from go to all the rehearsals to guarantee me their weekend in case we have to reschedule for a Saturday or a Sunday graduation. These guys are there for that. And I want to thank all the schools who have to deal with me coming in and our team and going, "Hey, we need to rearrange this, do this, and to make it worthwhile." But it all worked out really good. And I was very happy for the results from this year.
And the stream team was Eric, Dustin Keith, Paul
McNeely,
Bill, David, Brian, and Dwayne. They did a great job. Thank you, Eric.
Good job.
And I have one more little piece of
Yes,
good
ma'am.
news to share with you. I'd like to ask Mr. Brian Humphrey to come up. We have been doing coaches training. We started it a while back, about 4 years ago. We started bringing all of our coaches together to do training. We were concerned about the heat index and them not knowing what to do. We were concerned about lightning and what to do, but we were very concerned about our coaches being the best trained coaches in the state of Florida. So I've asked Brian just to share a few things. They actually went to the schools this year, to each school, and trained the ADs and the coaching staff on what they need to do. We are going to try our best not to have any of our children have a terrible medical issue and us not be at least as prepared as we can be. Go ahead, Brian.
So, yeah, like she was saying, 4 years ago,
she brought to our office some concerns with some coaches that we've had throughout the district. And what a lot of people don't realize is that our coaches are classroom teachers. Many of them went to school to teach math, science, social studies, and then they were recruited into the coaching field without any prior knowledge or information or a mentor. So what we did is we decided to put together a training where we pull all the coaches in one room, which was about 300 coaches. We did this for 3 years, and this year we did a little bit different, which I'll go over in a minute. But we pulled them together to go over all of the policies that they need to be aware of so that they can run their program effectively and stay within the rules. Because all of our teachers and coaches are on what's called a professional certificate. That's the only way you can be employed. And if you're violating policies, then your certificate's at risk. And Ms. Jackson brought that to us and said that no, we're not going to have that. We're going to have a training. And so we just finished our 4th year. And I'm just going to go down and hold on. I got some instructions to hit the down arrow, but it's already up there. I got it. So whenever we have our training, the policies that we would go over is FHSAA policies, and we would bring in 2 FHSA representatives every year, and they change their rules every year. And so it's always important to keep coaches updated on eligibility or things that they could do to cause them to either forfeit a game or have a monetary fine. Starting 2 years ago, FHSAA can fine the employee up to $5,000 and withdraw it from their check for a violation of certain policies. So it's important to let the coaches know this on the front end before they hear it on the back end. Finance, we've always had someone from our finance department in the school district come and discuss ticket taking procedures and money handling procedures. There's a process that they all have to be aware of, and we do not need any of our coaches violating those policies. Transportation, we always had Mr. Jay McGinnis come and discuss the technical assistance paper to make sure we're traveling correctly and safely. Title IX. Title IX has always been an issue with all of our athletics in middle and high school. We have been in compliance every year that I've been with this district. Mr. Jeff McGinnis has come every year and discussed with us his experience with the Title IX audit that was just a few years ago, which was actually about 15 years ago. But he's always come and shared that valuable information with our coaches and could speak on it firsthand. Mr. Steve Chapman would come and discuss code of ethics to make sure that we were following all of our code of ethics and the expectations of our behaviors. Mr. Johnson would always discuss conflict of interest, which is always brought through our office a couple of times every year, which we seem to be doing a lot better at. And then last year, Mr. Steve Orton came and discussed controlled open enrollment, which has had a huge effect on athletic eligibility. And just now, questions are starting to come in 2 years later, and I think everyone's understanding it's really affected how we handle homeschool eligibility, charter school eligibility. And then lastly, the group that come in that has made the largest impact for us is the Andrews Institute. They've brought doctors and trainers to come to these events to train our coaches on sports-related injury and injury prevention. And not only do they come that day, they're here hands-on all the time. There's not a week that goes by that I don't hear from them. So what we did this year as opposed to the last 3 years was FHSAA just changed their policy in their manual that says that all member schools, that would be all of our high schools, all member schools must have a written emergency action plan in place and posted and reviewed with your coaches. So when they put this out in the manual, I can just imagine 60-something counties scrambling to figure out what to write, how to write it, who's responsible. Well, the Andrews Institute wrote ours. Their medical professionals put the ours together, and I have some in a packet that I'll share with each of you so that you can look at. But they went on to marking where the AEDs were, where the entry gates to all the venues were, where the locks were, and made sure everybody had keys to them. So the reason we had to meet at each school is we had to meet with the coaches at that school to make sure that everybody knew where all the AEDs were, and everyone had access to them. And no gates were going to be locked without coaches having it. So we kind of reviewed the plan of what would happen in case of a serious injury.
And we're lucky that Andrews has provided us with this. It would have been a nightmare if we had to do it and take on that responsibility. So I can't say enough about, you know, their contribution. So with this meeting, we've also had discussions with cooling pools and with the summer coming and heat-related illness. And so Andrews has also kind of worked with us in creating cooling stations. And so last year we purchased cooling fans that actually lower the temperature of the air 20 degrees. And so all of our football programs are using those. I wish they were portable and we could move them around and let everyone use them, but they're really useful in football, just to make sure that we keep kids cooled down in the summer months.
Can I ask a question here, Mr. Humphreys?
Yeah.
Did this include middle school too?
We also took the emergency action plan written by the high schools and conformed it to our middle schools.
Wow. Okay,
it's
good.
not as detailed at this time, but yes, and we reviewed it with our coaches. So every one of our middle school coaches know that they have an emergency action plan in place, and we've reviewed it with them.
And your athletic training, was that for middle schools also?
Yes. The athletic training services are for all of the high schools year-round in every sport, and then in middle schools, they're for football games.
Awesome.
And they have access, but it's not, it's limited. They have to organize it.
And I mean, just to tag on to Dr. White's comments, you know, some of our middle schools don't have their own sporting facilities located at them, so they use high school facilities. So they were trained on the emergency action plan at the school. That's kind of their home school. So Pryor uses Choctaw, Bruner uses Fort Walton Stadium, so that if there are middle school events or games, soccer games, football games, track meets, what have you, those middle school coaches are part of that high school action plan.
Yes, we went over where the AEDs were, where the cooling submersion pools are, and where access to phones and first aid.
And I think it's real important about the AEDs. Those are those things they shock you with. Just this last year, I believe, at Flemington and Pace High School, Pine Forest, Flemington and Pine Forest, there were 2 kids that Andrews had trained their coaches on how to use the AEDs. If they hadn't trained them and they hadn't used them, there were 2 young athletes that would not be with us today. So I think this is very important. I think that especially the heat pieces and the cooling and all of that, and I'm so grateful to them for what they've done for us. And it's all free. It's all free. So that makes a huge difference to us because we have no money. But I appreciate Brian, and I think he does have a handout for you. I want our coaches to know what they're doing, and I don't ever want a child to lose their life because somebody didn't know where the AED was or didn't know how to cool that kid down when they overheat.
And then my last bullet was Andrews is also offering free CPR training to all of our coaches at their convenience throughout the year. So their goal is to have all of our coaches CPR trained.
And Mr. Humphreys, maybe sometime, I don't know what the number is, the number of kids that we have involved in athletics in Okaloosa County from middle school to high school, but maybe sometime you can give us an update, but I'm going to say it's in the thousands.
Easily. Very easily.
And Brian, if you would just give them that so they would have that handout. And I have to tell you all, we tested 83,000, we gave 83,000 tests this testing season. And did you hear of any issues? That's because they know what they're doing. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Humphreys. All right, so Superintendent, unless you have anything else, we'll move on to board members' business. And Mr. Walker, I'll go to you first, sir. All right, Mr. Destin.
I did have a brief information request or want the board to know.
All right.
Before Christmas, with the permission of the superintendent, I started working with Mr. Chambers and with Stacy Smith before
to see if we could come up with a method that we could give ourselves some reassurance that state laws and school board policies were being followed in all the HR issues. And Mr. Chambers has addressed, I think, and I'll ask him to get up and tell us what he's done. We've spoken personally about it, but I think has a button or a check off as principals hire people or recommend that they go through.
Yes, sir. So principals now on OASIS, when they are about to click hire, there's a field within OASIS that they can click that in essence says that all state, federal, and Okaloosa policies have been followed in terms of hiring. So they click that. That then generates a field to HR where we also verify that all background checks and so forth have been followed on the HR side. So when that comes to you in terms of personal recommendations, you have the assurance that we followed all Okaloosa policies, state and federal guidelines, and we've done all of our background checks and so forth on employees.
I also requested that assurance appear on our agenda on HR matters. We are still, unless you've spoken to Mr. McGinnis since you and I talked a few days ago, we're still trying to figure out how to do that where we can make the HR staff comfortable. And have you spoken to Jeff on that issue recently?
We've had a brief conversation. Of course, he's out of town right now. I've spoken with Ms. Jackson about it as well, but we are looking at the wording.
Okay, and we'll continue to pursue that component. But I think, at least as one board member, it will make me feel very comfortable and assured when I see these things pass through that, you know, they have done their due diligence and are making sure that it all complies. And that's all I have tonight.
All right, thank you, Mr. Destin. Ms. Thrush.
Just to go back to something Mr. Walker brought up in regards to transportation, you know, on our agenda every month is our monthly financial statement, and so the public can see that we're spending roughly $13 million to transport students in Okaloosa County, but the revenue that we receive is, you know, under $7 million or roughly $6.6 million. And as Mr. Walker stated, that difference comes from our operating fund. So that means we have less operating funds to, you know, purchase or hire more people, replace textbooks, purchase software, et cetera, et cetera. And so therein lies the problem that Mr. Walker alluded to, is that we are so sorely underfunded. So I hope that members of the audience, as well as people watching, all of our state legislators had the opportunity recently to answer a poll by the Department of State of Florida whether they would like to hold a special legislative session to discuss public education funding in the state of Florida. And to my knowledge, 2 of our local legislators didn't bother to answer to that poll, and then 2 of them voted not to have a special education legislative session. So I hope that all registered Florida voters hold their local leaders accountable and ask them tough questions, why or why not they do not support public education funding, and that we mention the concerns that our student, Ms. Montano, spoke of, the statements that Ms. Dr. Lamberson discussed this evening in her presentation to the board. I hope that we all really start to push for better public education funding, because we rank in the bottom 10 of 50 states in per pupil funding for public education. And I just wanted to thank all of our administrators and school staff, our maintenance staff, our custodial staff for making wonderful graduation celebrations at all of our schools, and then again for our maintenance and custodial staff for coverage this weekend, preparing a school facility to be a shelter, and then also just all the cleanup and insurance of making sure all our facilities were up and running back for our staff members this week. That's it.
All right, thank you, Ms. Thrush. Mr. Bryan.
Just a few things, Dr. White. First of all, Eric, I just want to say thank you to your team that helped live stream at Baker. That was the only school where we actually had to move from outside inside, and they did a great job. And of course to the staff of Baker School to get it ready for graduation. But staying at Baker, I just wanted to recognize their junior ROTC program as they unveiled a new patriotic display honoring the military and first responders. This shrine, if you get a chance to go up there, it is a beautiful shrine. I know Miss Jackson was there when they actually unveiled it. I know Ms. Thrush and I were able to take a look at it also. This is an awesome display of honoring our military and our first responders. I'd also like to thank the Exchange Club of Crestview, which is unfortunately no longer in operation, but they helped coordinate the project. And our Honorable Mayor, David Cadle of Crestview, was very instrumental in helping the school get funding for that. Also, Crestview High School's programming team, still in beta, participated in Lockheed Martin's Code Quest competition in the advanced category and placed 24 out of 39. There were over 370 students comprising 85 teams in attendance at the Orlando location of the Lockheed Martin sponsored competition. So congratulations to them. And then finally, the students in the cosmetology programs at Crestview High School and the OTC Center were given a $4,000 check as a statewide investment by AT&T this year. And this is a great source for them to continue building the cosmetology program in both locations. And if you get a chance, all you have to do is sign a waiver, and they'll cut your hair for you and all that, and do your nails and all that other good stuff. But if you go into, I've been into both of them, but Crestview is, of course, in my zone. But if you go into their cosmetology department, it's like a full-fledged salon. And not only are they teaching them cosmetology and all that, but they also have to have certain math requirements because they're also teaching them how to run a business. And so when you walk in, it's like you're walking into a full salon. So congratulations to them.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bryan. Well, the only thing I'll say is that good job to all the schools on the high school graduations. They were awesome, and just appreciate all that hard work. All right, how about anything from staff? All right, Superintendent, unless you have anything, Mr. Ankers, board members, this meeting's over.
Be careful going on there.
I'm gonna do my best.
I saw you there. I tried to get you the info on the parking.